right, on Tuesday, May 28th at 7 o'clock, we are going to call to order the regular governing board meeting. We are going to look and see that we have 4 board members here, minus Ms. Frank, and we are going to stand for the pledge and stay standing for a few moments after that for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. I'm going to ask if we can adopt the agenda.
I move that the governing board adopt the agenda with the exception of moving agenda action item 7C directly following reports 3C.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? 4 ayes and no opposition. So, governing board reports. Ms. Tweedy?
Just real quick, I enjoyed going to all the graduations and 8th grade promotions and really proud of our students.
Mrs. Reed?
The last 2 weeks have been really, really fun. Going to the senior awards nights, the retirement ceremony that we had to honor our district employees that were retiring, which was amazing to hear about all the accomplishments and the service that they've given to our schools and our district and our students over the last, some of them, 4 decades. So that was really wonderful. I attended my own son's kindergarten promotion, which was Gardner after 4 shows. And then the next day I got to attend my youngest nephew's high school graduation. So that was fun to be up on the stage and watch him as he was presented with his high school diploma. I also attended the Pursuing Victory with Honor Award ceremony to honor our district athletes and coaches, and that was just a great time of recognition and just to honor the service that some of our employees have given the district over the last couple of years and up to several decades. And all the graduations were great. I was hopping for the last 2 weeks. Every day was like 2, 3, or 4 different events that I was able to attend. So I'm thankful that I had the time in my schedule and that my husband was able to hold down the fort while I was gone for 2 weeks.
Almost made it sound like a vacation there. Mrs. O'Brien?
Congratulations to everyone on completing another successful school year. It was also awesome to be able to attend the high school graduations and 8th grade promotions. I unfortunately didn't get to attend the retirement ceremony, so thank you to all of those who are retiring from our district and served all those years for us. I do appreciate all that you've done for our students. We had a study session last week on the Special Education Futures Report, which was a lot of great information. I'm also thankful to some employees who provided some feedback via email to the board regarding that, and I look forward to what Cabinet and Dr. Finch present as a plan to do with those recommendations. I hope everybody takes time to enjoy their summer and take some me time and some family time and just rejuvenate before we start that new school year later on this summer. Thanks.
Well, I will say that what Ms. Tweedy said, what Mrs. Reed said, and this is what Mrs. O'Brien said. I'll just, say it again because all of that stuff I had an opportunity to do also. What I do want to mention is that we are wishing all of our 9-month employees a fabulous summer, but all you people that are 10 and 12-month employees, we hope you have a fabulous summer too, because you'll be seeing us over that summer as you prepare for the next school year. Great thanks for all of our employees who are veterans. Good luck to all of our graduates especially those that have chosen to enlist and have been enlisted in the armed services. So with that, Dr. Finch, take it away.
Yes, I'll echo the same as well. Obviously, our graduations are a great opportunity to connect again with kids and families, and nice to see our support out there from our families. And our graduations went off with without a hitch again, so thanks to Karen. She does a nice job with that. We had 2 A+ celebrations, 2 of our 5 here the last 2 weeks at Copper Creek and Arrowhead. That was, again, great to see us climb the A+ ladder. I think we're up to 18 now, 17 or 18. So that's pretty amazing. I'm sure we're leading the state in that category. I just haven't looked it up yet. But I will have it for you. And also, as I mentioned, I think I might have mentioned in the Friday update. If I did not, just letting you know that I'm meeting with the team around the Futures Report, trying to draft a plan, hopefully to get you something by our board retreat. That's my goal. I don't know if I'll make it, but I'm going to take a stab at it. And then a reminder, Tech Fest is next week, the 5th and the 6th, if you want to see that, at DeVille High School. And I will be doing a session on Twitter, social media. Who would have guessed that? That's it. Thanks.
Jim next. Okay, Mr. Miglerino, we've got questions for you, I think. I'm sorry, you haven't started yet.
Good evening, President Ordway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. We have a brief report on the Bond and Override Citizens Advisory Committee. So per our board policy, we seek input from the community whenever we're contemplating an election, and there is an election time frame that's set out in statute as to when we need to actually make some decisions about upcoming elections. As a reminder, we can only have elections in the November election. Many years ago, we had options with elections, but that is no longer statutorily allowed. So time frame wise, this usually ends up being in the spring, and it worked well this year because we had just completed the budget committee effort. So a lot of the input from the budget committee was information that could be shared with this particular committee as well. So we had a charge to look at the educational and building needs of the district and consider any future elections. The committee met 3 times, twice in April and once at the beginning of May. Here are all the committee members. So we had 2 representatives from each of the high school regions. So this doesn't mean that they would all be high school parents, but they were parents of students that attended a school within the 5 high school regions, and we tried to get a cross sampling of various grade configurations. So some from the elementary schools, some from the middle schools, and some from the high schools. We had some community input as well, and we had a couple staff members that joined us because there's a lot of detailed information that staff has in regards to the information that was being compiled. In April, we just quickly, the agenda, I won't read all of this, but we kind of went through just building some foundational information about the finances for the school district as a whole. We continued that conversation during the second meeting, including started to develop a list of needs for our operational needs, or what we call our M&O, or maintenance and operations needs for the district, and capital needs. And much of that information was determined from additional information that we received. Like I mentioned, the budget committee, as well as staff, provided information looking forward, especially when it came to capital planning. And then we certainly took input from the committee members as well. On May 8th, our third and I think final meeting, we did end up developing an election recommendation, 2 election recommendations for the board's consideration. This is just a report, so there's no action for the board to take this evening. But pending any input from the board from this report, we are at least tentatively planning for this to be on the June 11th board agenda as an action item. Just quickly, the history of the elections. Elections aren't new for Deer Valley, and certainly we've had an M&O override in place for a very long time. But they are required to be renewed every 5 years. They're good for 7 years, but after the 5th year, they decline by 1/3. The 6th year, they decline by 2/3, and then in the 7th year, they go away completely. The last election that we had was back in 2015 for the M&O override. It did pass for that election, which was a huge milestone for us because we also increased the M&O amount from 10% to 15%. So we're at the maximum amount that's allowable for that override. This is just some of the information that the committee looked at, which is basically the funding for the past 3 years for our comparable districts, the state average, and then the national average. And with the 15% override in place, you can still see that we're we're more in line with what our comparable districts have, the green bars, if you will. We're still lagging behind what the state has as an average, and certainly considerably behind the national average, which is a couple years old because that data is not available. So it's worth noting that all of our comparable districts have an M&O override in place. Most of them have a 15% override. So it's certainly more commonplace to have the M&O override. The state averages that you see there are the ones that get ranked where the state funding for Arizona would be at or near the bottom. I saw a report today where I think we're 4th from the bottom, so a slight move up with some of the money that was infused for this year or the more recent years. So we're not, well, I guess 4th from the bottom is still near the bottom, depending on your perspective. But you can see we don't even get the state level of funding. That's with the existing 15% override that we have in place. And this is where we had quite a bit of conversation as a committee because these are the amounts and how they're broken out between the different categories. And this is already being spent on these areas. What's difficult now is if we wanted to spend the money on something differently, we'd have to forego or at least shuffle around what we're currently spending the M&O override on to be able to make way for something new if we were going to add something to this list, which was a difficult proposition. So we're fortunate that we have just over $27 million worth of override funds that we get to count on for this year and fiscal year. We're just finishing this year, fiscal year 19. But if we wanted to, for example, reduce class size even further, we'd have to reduce something else that's on this list. So again, this is just for example. If we said, okay, we're going to change our salary structures in order to decrease class size even more. Basically, what comes from that is very unpopular decisions that we would have to make to try and forego something that we're already enjoying to be able to add something more to this list. So there was a lot of discussion around that, and eventually what the recommendation came up with is to essentially keep everything the same but add one word to the support services staff to include counselors so that it would be more definitive. If I look at the last piece of information that I was sharing with you. On this particular slide, it just shows support services staff. The recommendation is to change that to continue to provide counselors and support services staff. So you can see that each of the verbs that we included here, or the vernacular, is to continue. So essentially, the committee feels that we should continue to ask for the 15% override, which again has to, statutorily, we have to have it renewed by the taxpayers, the voters, because the voters are the ones that pay for that additional $27 million that we enjoy as a district. Although there was quite a bit of discussion around this, in the committee itself, really not a whole lot of change to this. So not necessarily adding counselors, just making sure that counselors could be included in what we fund from the M&O override if it were to pass, if the board was to call for the election, and then if it were to pass in November. On the capital side, I'll just warn you in advance, there's some really, really, really small font. I mean, even small by my standards. And my intent isn't for this to be an eye test, but it's just to get the gist of the level of information that we looked at as a committee. This is just one of the pieces of information we use to set up the, why we have a need. The blue bars here represent the allocation of what we call district additional assistance. This is the capital funding that we receive as a district. The red bar is the amount of money we actually received in each of those fiscal years. So the state continues to impose reductions to our district. And even though that has been partially restored, you can see a slight increase in the red bar from 17-18 to 18-19. And there will be, with the budget that was passed, I guess technically this morning, very early this morning, there is an additional restoration of district additional assistance. But it's a far cry from what the formula would generate for us. And so we have a lot of pent-up or built-up demand that has not been met from the state-imposed reductions. And so the committee looked at that in these general categories, if you will: student growth and instructional-related needs. That included textbook adoption, software needs, building renovations for innovation, so changes to how we deliver the curriculum, and then a lot of technological needs that we have as a district. Essentially furniture, fixtures, and equipment, transportation, including bus replacements and white fleet additions and replacements, and then just overall general facility building renewal plans. These are everything from our scheduled replacements to our safety and security, our conservation efforts, and then specific improvements for extracurricular activities, extracurricular and co-curricular activities. And so this is kind of a summary of all of those needs by those categories that we just talked about. And there's a lot more detail to this information that I'd be happy to share if it's the pleasure of the board. But the bottom line is, when we get to and I should mention that the way this has to be organized, for the pamphlet, there are non-administrative needs, so those are essentially school needs, so that's the first page. And then there are administration needs, which are basically any improvements that would not be for a specific school. So it has to be broken out in that manner. The grand total of the needs that we had as a district was just at $175 million for the next 5 years. This is the small font I've warned you about. We have, this is I won't say much more legible. It's almost readable if I was to print it on a large scale. But essentially this has even more detail than the summary that we just went through, but still creates the same information, the $175 million. The difference here, the blue shading at the bottom, are capital needs that cannot be funded from the bond. So there are some statutory restrictions as to what bond money can and cannot be used for. And that's the section that's at the bottom of this sheet. The reason that there's so many columns, there's so much information on here, we also projected this out over that 5-year period of time to see exactly kind of what our cash flow needs would be from 1 year to the next. This is equally almost impossible to read, but this is a potential tax rate impact of that $175 million. And the note here is probably worth more than the information that's virtually illegible, is that our current tax rate is at $1.48 for our bond program, and we can layer in the $175 million in 5 installments and essentially have no increase in the secondary tax rate related to the bond. So I think that's big because we'd be asking the voters to consider renewing or continuing the M&O override, which is just to continue what we currently have, and to support a new bond authorization that would be no new taxes no new increases to the tax rate to generate those additional $175 million. The reason for that is we have a very aggressive debt repayment schedule. And this is a very conservative estimate because in the voter pamphlet, they passed a law in the last 2 years in which the assessed valuation has to be a 10-year rolling average of what the assessed valuation growth has been. And if you go back 10 years, our assessed valuation was still declining in year 9 and 10. And so this is showing no assessed valuation growth and still keeping the tax rate at $1.48. In reality, and I can't predict the future, but in reality, the assessed valuation will go up. It went up over 7% just this last year. So with the assessed valuation going up, that would actually cause the tax rate to go down. So the voters could essentially be voting for a bond authorization that could result in a reduction in the tax rate in reality. Now, we don't control what happens with the assessed valuation, but by all things that we know currently, it will be increasing at least for the next couple years just because of assessed valuation growth in existing property and new additional development that is being added to the tax rolls as well. So in this case, the recommendation from the committee was to call for a November 5th election in the amount of $175 million. So the two recommendations, one to renew the M&O override at the current 15% amount, and the second recommendation is to call for a $175 million bond authorization. Again, this is just a report, and be happy to answer any questions the board might have, and we can provide additional detailed information as would be warranted.
Ms. Tweedy?
I just have a comment. I think you said in your report that it was going to be brought back June 11th as an action item, and so I would just like to express my dissatisfaction again when we don't have things as preview items before they're action items. And the reason for that, had this been listed as a preview item, I would have taken time to read it a lot closer, have my questions. We could have had a discussion prior to the vote. And because I don't typically go through Mr. Miglerino's board report, but thinking I'm going to have to vote on it at the next meeting. So I said I had a problem with it when it was done with the budget 2 years in a row, and I'm just going to bring that up. So for what it's worth, I think we should follow that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not being voted on tonight. It's really for preview, so you have 2 weeks to work on it if you have any questions.
Had it been listed as a preview item, I would have looked at it differently and made notes, knowing I would have had to vote on it at the next meeting. Because it wasn't listed that way, it was presented this way. It was quickly. It was even a small font. According to Mr. Miglerino, even admitted it wasn't readable. And now we're being told it's being brought back as an action item at the next meeting.
Right.
So I'm
time to
upset
ask
about
questions
that.
between the next 2 weeks. We'll
Yeah,
take
but
care
I
of
would
them.
have liked to have had the discussion, and if it was something that we could have discussed as a board, I'm just saying,
Okay.
I think anything we should vote on should be put as a preview item at the previous board meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes we do previews. Sometimes we do
Well,
reports.
it just should be done. That's what we kind of put, and that's what Jenny and I always went by.
Okay. Well, so if you have any questions in the next 2 weeks, let us know. Thanks.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Thank you. Thank you for the detailed list of the capital needs and that portion of the report. I do appreciate that, Mr. Miglerino. As part of the override, the M&O override, I can't get my computer to work right now. There's a section called Specialized Programs for Students, including co-curricular, extracurricular, and full-day kindergarten. In the next Friday, well, maybe not this Friday, but sooner rather than later, before we have to see it on June 11th and have time to process, could we have a further breakdown of that $5 million in the different categories, if that's not too much of an ask?
We have that.
Dr. Finch, do you want to say anything?
No, I just want to thank Jim and his team that worked on it. I attended all of the meetings as well. And it was a nice segue from all the data that we had collected from the budget process. So it just one fed right into the other. So that worked out well. We had a lot of obviously a lot of input in the last 6 months. In fact, we had probably a little survey fatigue from our community, and so it all worked together in the same direction because we just went through the budget stuff. So just want to thank Jim and his team for working on it.
Okay, and again, Mr. Miglorino, I appreciate you. I don't know how you guys gathered the people that joined the committee, but it looked like a real good cross-section, not only of our regions, but also of the stakeholder makeup. So we will email Dr. Finch our questions, and whatever the information is that Mrs. O'Brien had asked for, you guys will send that to all of us, right? So with that,
We are going to go to action item 7C. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation for the principal of Mountain Ridge High School, which is Mr. David Vines.
Second.
Sorry.
ooh, look at that. Fight to the duel there with a second. All those in favor? Oh. Are there any questions?
And first,
Would just like to introduce
Introduce
David
him first,
Vines
and then we'll vote on it.
formally. David comes
On
back
minutes.
to us. He was a former employee of Deer Valley Unified School District working at O'Connor, and he is working in the Scottsdale Unified School District currently, and we're happy to recommend him to you. I know Dr. Finch is as well, and we're, should you approve him, really happy to have him aboard.
May we vote now? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Looks like it's 4.
congratulations,
So I
David.
guess we can say welcome aboard from the board.
Welcome back.
And now you get to stay for the rest of the meeting. Oh, Jen, why are you showing him the way out? Gosh. All right, are we going to go to public comment?
We are going to move on to public comments. The board invites public comment on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. To accommodate all speakers within the 30-minute overall limit, the board president may shorten speakers' times. Vulgarity, disruptive conduct, or remarks disrespecting employees by name will not be allowed. The governing board cannot discuss or act on any items not listed on the agenda. Board members may respond to criticism, ask staff to review a matter, or request a future agenda item. And with that being said, I would call Ray Ormsby to the microphone, and if you could please just say your name for the record.
Ray Ormsby. That good? Thank you. After 5 years of teaching at Mountain Ridge High School, during my last month, I was awarded a letter of reprimand after an appeal hearing. I disagree with several of the hearing officer's conclusions, the most glaring of which he supposed the witness statements I submitted and the 3 live witnesses that all were unable to appear at the last moment but still provided hard copy statements were attesting to my character. That was not the intent. My character is not an issue for this district to judge. It's between my God and I am assured by him that we are fine. What I wanted the hearing officer to see was my record of actions and intent, specifically how from my very first year of teaching, my instinct and motivation has always been to help my students no matter the crisis. I left a very exciting and fulfilling flying career in the Air Force to work with teens. I had a strong sense that American youth on a daily basis operated in or lived in crisis. My very first semester teaching bilingual ESL math, one of the students burst into our classroom portable after school, pleading with me to give him a ride home. When challenged, he told me about recently jumping out of his gang, and he had to get home before 4 when his gang did their neighborhood rounds. The student was fearing for his life because if they saw him outside, they would shoot him. It was about 3:30, and I followed the student home with about 5 minutes to spare. As I pulled up to his house, he pointed out the bullet holes in his house from the previous drive-bys. A year and a half later, another one of my students paged me while I was dropping my son off at the U of A. Well, this particular student paged me to say that she had taken a mouthful of pills. I realized that she was trying to overdose and was scared, rightfully so. I notified the paramedics, and they responded in time, got her stomach pumped, and the following Monday we began sorting it all out. She ended up telling her story through a letter to the Silver Apple Committee, and in fact that year I was one of the 13 Silver Apple recipients. I also helped one of my students report on the consistent molestation and rape committed by her biological father. No one believed her but me and eventually her older sister, who convinced the authorities to investigate and found it to be true. At another school, I helped a student whose best friend brought her to me, finally to find the courage to admit she was bulimic. I walked home with her after school and sat with her and her parents as she confessed her struggle. I quietly left their home as they cried, holding each other. I bumped into her at the same best friend's wedding several years ago. She is very happily married with her own little family. My last examples of many at the award ceremony for the Teacher of the Year from KTRR and Rio Salado College. The head of the award committee read a portion of the letter that they said had cinched my winning. The student stated, "I would trust chemo with my life." That same year, during the summer, one of my students contacted me terrified because she had taken a bunch of ecstasy and thought she was dying. I called 911. She, in fact, would have died with the amount of drugs she had ingested. Each year, we celebrate her second birthday on the 11th of July. This year, she is 10. Not only did I receive a letter of reprimand for not aiding one of my students quickly enough, but because of that letter, I'm not eligible to receive any of my performance pay. This is tantamount to being fined about $3,000. So in essence, in spite of my highly effective evaluation rating and the 180 days of excellence in innovation, which I believe even you, Madam President, commented on during a visit to my classroom, the one with the sofas, I am being penalized financially just as I retire. A few years ago, when I did not receive any Prop 123 money because I was one of the 200 certified employees who had $500 moved from their hard-to-fill addenda to the base salary so it could look as if I received Prop 123 monies, I took it in stride. But now this feels punitive, which I understand is one of the reputations this district has. But for the life of me, to punish a retiring teacher in this manner is despicable. To link the performance pay, the teacher, to recap, teacher that literally saves lives, provides an exceptional educational experience, retired, has already lost $2,000+ for lack of integrity, forms youth groups, international leadership programs, nonprofits, officiates weddings and baptisms. To link the performance pay money to anything that goes beyond the scope of the voters' intentions should be revisited, and especially in unique circumstances such as mine, what more would you have me do? Questions?
Thanks.
Can you provide us with an update on that and a Friday update? Thank you. I'm going to apologize now for any names that I may say incorrectly. Edward Zwar. Did I come close? Please come to the podium and say your name for the record.
Edward Zwar, and you did pronounce it correctly the second time, so thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I am here on a topic that I have emailed all four plus Mrs. Frank about, i.e. my dispatchers, my train, range 25 that we are now not getting. If I could, I would like to get job duties, i.e. driving hours, working weekends, and after hours for support of dispatchers. If I could get that clarified at some time. What we are asking for is 5 of us are going to be, 2 of us range 24, the other 3 are going to be range 25. Mr. Miglioreno said that there was 3 in routing that was driving. There's only 1 actually. There's only 2 of us here that are 12-month. Mr. Valens, a 10-month employee, range 22. What we're asking for our 5 12-month plus 1 10-month is $11,628 after 95 cents. Let's use a child transported by ALC, which is a company we use to pay. We pay on average $233 per child per day on private transport. 50 days at $233 will be more than we're asking for over a 12-month period. Total number of days driving routes just for me and my 3 dispatchers was 607 with an average of 151 days per dispatcher. Now 151.75 at 233 equals $141,431. If there was only 1 child on that bus and we only did 1 school. In reality, there's 3 schools twice a day. So if we want to bump it up, now we're looking at $10,607,325. That's if we only did half of a day. If we do the full day, we're looking at $21,214,650,000. I'm going to get you guys the numbers. I got you guys the numbers. It was also brought to the possibility of range 25 if we had to drive or not. He said it was unfortunately that we moved into this position from drivers. We would like to know if we are not going to be afforded the range 25 pay and bumped up to range 25, are we going to be needed to be paid? He also mentioned possibility of when we did drive, paying us the 95 cents. If I send a driver to Tucson for a softball team, they're down there for 15 hours. It's an average of 3 hours down there, 3 hours back. They're sitting there in a hotel room for 9 hours. We're still paying them the 95 cents an hour for that 9 hours to sit doing nothing. We do a route, we come back, we're still productive the whole day. As a lead dispatcher, I was offered range 24. Miss Maggie was range 24. All we're asking is to be equal. I do supervisor positions right now. I do interviews. I do training. Miss Maggie does training. We both do chronos. My drivers right now, Valen being a 10-month employee, is going to, if he does not afforded at range 25, he will be making less than a brand new driver that just got their certification right before school started, but right before school ended. So you're asking this man to drive plus do his duties as dispatch for less money than a driver. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is,
I requested this be put on the agenda at the last meeting, so I'd just like to reiterate my request that we put this on the agenda.
okay. We can't ask you any questions and we're at this time, but we do the rest of you want to speak still that submitted forms? Madeline, I have Madeline Morrison. Okay, would you like to address the board? Okay,
I go by Maggie, just so you guys know.
okay.
I'm the lead trainer. I'm the only trainer in the district. I have to have a CDL. I have to be able to drive. I put the bus drivers on the road. I'm the one that tests them and gives them a CDL to drive. If I don't drive, then I don't have to have a CDL. You guys don't have a tester to put your bus drivers on the road. But yet you want to pay your bus drivers more than you want to pay me because I'm only at range 24 and they're at range 25. So the woman that's putting them on the road is making less money than the driver she's putting on the road. I'm not, I totally understand about the bus drivers. I've been supportive of that raise for years because I've been a bus driver for 33 years. I'm totally supportive of that. I just feel if I'm the one putting them on the road, that is mine.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have next, Lori Kell, would you like to speak?
I'm actually representing the supervisors, the lead supervisors. There's 4 of us that have our CDL with the S&P endorsement. My first year, I've been supervisor for 3 years. In my first year, I drove a lot, plus learning what I was supposed to do with evaluations and what a supervisor is to do. So the stress of that, but we got through it. Last year, 2 years ago, the same thing, driving every day, pretty much with them. It was just hard for us to do their supervisor job plus driving, which we knew the students come first, so we go out and drive. But when they gave the raises to the drivers, which they needed it, we need it. There's across the country, we have a problem with driving. Getting drivers, and everyone understands that, but this isn't going to be the solution because it's every school district across the country has the problem, but it should help. But the problem when we all drove so much, we didn't feel that we got recognized for that. The drivers, yes, they drove, but we also drove too. We have to keep our CDL and S&P endorsement just like the drivers do, and we feel that we should be recognized for that and get that driver pay also. I feel bad. Their range, our range as a supervisor is elevated, but our pay is probably just a couple dollars more than those drivers. Because of that raise, they came up to where our supervisors are. And to us, we don't feel we get recognized enough and get thanked enough for going out there and driving every day, plus doing our supervisor job, talking to the parents, taking care of all the discipline that needs to be done. That's all I have.
No,
Thank you.
that's a good example of compression that's happening throughout our system. Thank you.
I have a quick, just to make sure I heard it correctly. You said a CDL with a S, N, or M?
S&P endorsements.
S&P.
Driving.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate
There is,
that.
like, even there's the mechanics. We have 3 mechanics that went above and beyond and got their CDLs with the S&P endorsement. They already had their CDLs. So I felt that they went above and beyond, that they should get recognized because they were driving just like we were.
Okay.
So
Thank
that's
you.
what I felt, the driving part.
All right. Thank you so much. I have a sheet for Donna Burrian Hedges. Would you like to speak?
I just had a few questions and remarks regarding the memo that came out on the raises and changes in transportation department. Over the last 9 years or so, I went from being a big bus driver to a special needs driver to being a lead driver. Last summer, I went from being a lead driver into routing. The official title is Transportation Computer Specialist 1. I do the routing for 3 regions and for the McKinney-Vento kids, plus I drive a bus. According to the memo that came out, not only is my grade level and pay staying at a range 22, but dispatch is also staying at a 22. Now we will be below that of a driver, which will be a grade 25, along with the extra rate increases. When we took these positions, we did not receive a grade or a pay increase. We moved over at the same rate as a driver with added responsibilities. Not in our wildest dreams did we think or know we would be penalized for taking a job that should have come with a grade increase and raise in the first place. We took these positions in good faith. We were moving forward and taking a step up the ladder and furthering our careers here at Deer Valley Unified School District. Under these new guidelines, if anyone in routing or dispatch was to leave, a driver was to apply for the position and take it, they would have to take a 6% decrease in pay. Where does this make sense? Who would do that? How about putting yourselves in our position? Is there any of you that would have knowingly and willingly put yourself into this position? I think not. Whether our title is driver, transportation computer specialist 1, or dispatcher, we all have the same requirements as a driver, only with extra responsibilities. We have to keep our CDL Class Bs with the S&P endorsement. We have to have our fingerprint cards, our CPR first aid certifications, and our medical certifications. We have to have our current Arizona school bus driver certificate issued by DPS, and we have to do the same refresher classes and pre-trip classes as the drivers. I'm guessing we all need a clear description of what our jobs are, what the expectations are, and what our hours are. If my job description includes preferred CDL and I'm required to have my CDL along with all the other certifications, where do we not qualify as a driver? Whether we drive on a daily basis or not, we have been in that position and we continue to do them. We are not asking for a lot. What we are asking for is to be treated fairly. We are asking to be kept on a fair and level playing field, and at the very least, the same grade level and pay increases as our veteran drivers. We have earned that for the jobs we have done and for the jobs we continue to do. We are asking to not be penalized by having to accept a lower grade level and less pay than a driver. I have no doubt that you know we have earned and deserve these increases along with the drivers. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then last but not least, is it Parker Preston?
Ma'am.
Okay.
My name is Parker Preston. I'm a dispatcher also. I'm in charge of activities and field trips this year. I started out last year, 17th to 18th year, going as a 10-month employee. Started out in January. Was in charge of athletics at the time. As you all know, we were very short as far as that went for athletic buses that year. We scratched, we scrambled, We did what we had to. At times, you know, it felt like we had to be Jesus and, you know, feed the 5,000. But we made it through the year. And it was a very interesting thing for me because I'm a Class A CDL driver. Through the years of doing that, I used to make $30 an hour. I had a $70 a day per diem. I hauled millions of dollars worth of equipment. Now I turn around, I'm hauling a priceless load, and I'm not even paid half that. Now, you have to have a love for the job then, okay? And I did. I enjoyed my 7 years, my first years. It worked out for me. When my kids were off, I was off. It helped my wife out travel. It worked out. Once the kids graduated now, you have to really love it. And I think we do make a difference as a bus driver day to day, seeing those kids first off. I really do. That's what made me stay. But after 7 years of doing it on one route, I needed more of a challenge. That's why I went into 10 months. And boy, did I get it. Okay? I found out first boat where I was when we had the walkout, and I realized that I lost my seniority on the board, and then the people that we needed to make the place run, I would be the last called in because I lost all seniority. Kind of made me think, did I really jump up or did I jump down? Okay? Now I think, I don't know, did I jump down again? Because now I made my 12-month employee, but I come in at 5 in the morning. I don't know what route I'm going to do. We do a different route all the time. It's not like the same thing. So I've got a 6-hour FTE route I'm running and an 8-hour job that you want me to cram into 10 hours so I'm not going over my DPS maximum allotted hours for the week. You know? And at 10-month, I used to do radio 2 hours a night, and 1 weekend a month we did Friday and Saturday, which we were paid 2 hours, but of course always went over. We always went over in our hours, especially if somebody had an accident or something like that. We had to drop what we're doing, come in, set up for the drug test, set up for everything else. So we're giving way and far beyond. I just think that it's just wrong to have bus drivers coming in making more than what we're making, and we've worked all this time to get where we are. So that's all I have to say about it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate Mr. Miglerino did provide us the additional financial information in a previous update. Maybe we could have that back again in
Sure.
the most current update.
Yep. No, thanks for your
Thank you all
input.
for
Appreciate
coming
it.
and sharing.
And it's
with you.
throughout our system. So, yeah, thanks for the additional information.
Mrs. Reed?
I just wanted to say thank you for coming and speaking and for all of the emails and providing us with additional information. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
I'm trying. I move that the governing board approve consent agenda. Oh no, we're not on consent agenda. I apologize. I was skipping ahead. I move that the governing board approve to alter the regular governing board meeting date from July 9th to July 11th, 2019.
I second.
Explanation, Dr. Finch?
I will be in Washington, D.C. at that date. So if we move it 2 more days down the road there, I'll be able to make it back in time.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposition, 0.
Okay, the new EL curriculum resources. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to adopt the recommended EL curriculum resources for 2019-2020.
I second.
Do we have anything, Dr. Gilligan? All right, is there any questions that we have? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? 0 opposed. 4. Let's go to 5C.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the fiscal year 20 classroom site fund plan.
I second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody in opposition? No. So that would be 4-0. Let's go to consent agenda.
I move that the governing board approve consent agenda items 6A through 6M.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposition. Okay, let us go to 7A.
I move that the governing board approve all employee out-of-state travel per governing board policy GCCE.
I second.
Any questions? Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposition. We will go to 7B.
I move that the governing board award a pre-construction services contract to Chase Building Team for the elementary number 31 school using the construction manager at risk method contingent on successful negotiation of pre-construction services contract.
I second.
Do we have discussion? Mr. Miglarino, did you want to go over anything with us?
President Ordway, maybe just a quick update. Members of the board, Dr. Finch, as we have talked about for several months, part of the land exchange agreement that we entered into with USAA regarding the Union Park development has some milestones in it, in which at the 100 home sale milestone, we're required to provide them with a 50% design set for a new elementary school. We have provided that to them. I believe they are over 100 homes. The last update that they sent us was back on May 10th, and they're selling about 7 homes a week in that development. And our next milestone is at the 200th home sale, which we anticipate they'll be able to reach at the current pace in August or September. And at that point in time, we have to have a pre-construction contract in place. If they continue at this pace, we're also going to have a capacity issue around the surrounding area with the Norterra Canyon and Sonoran Foothills School. So we are accelerating our efforts to be able to consider opening the school in August of 2020. To do that, we would need to have the plans submitted to the City of Phoenix by the end of May, and we do have a tentative timetable set up to be able to do that. What's being considered this evening is the pre-construction contract to bring on the third member of the team, which would be the general contractor, or what we refer to as the construction manager at risk. They would help us develop the guaranteed maximum price, or what we refer to as the GMP. The GMP would be brought to the board sometime probably in, I would guess, August for final consideration for building the school. So we do have a design set that we can share with you. We haven't shared it with the board because we are having difficulty scheduling a meeting with USAA to get their feedback. So we have a 50% design set, but it is likely to change from input from USAA, which is also in the land exchange agreement. We have to give them an opportunity to provide comments regarding the design. All that being said, we're on a very fast track to consider starting the construction of this school by the start of this upcoming school year, so that we would be ready to open the school the following August, so August of 2020. That's all tentative at this point in time. We figured we'd take this approach, knowing that if for any reason anything slows down or any changes happen, we can always delay the process until we get to the point of the GMP and getting the general contractor under contract for the actual construction. At this point, we're all just doing the preliminary work for the pre-construction services. And then just one final note, there was a change made this last legislative session with an emergency clause that still allows us to use this methodology to be able to make the selection We did receive 4 responses to our solicitation, and 4 very qualified responses. The committee that ranked these did rate the Chase Building team, who the last project Chase Building team did for us is the Sonoran Foothills project. So they built the last new elementary school for us. So it would be the same team that actually built Sonoran Foothills that would be working on this new school in the Union Park development. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Does anyone have any questions? Then we'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Tweedy?
Abstain.
Okay. And there's no opposition, so that would be. Did we all vote on the computer? All right. Moving on to our preview.
President Ordway, governing board members, and Superintendent Finch. Can you hear me? Is that
Well, I
better?
can, but I don't think everyone else can.
Little bit.
Like the recording, we want you to be
Okay,
heard.
I'll
loud and
speak
clear.
as loud as possible. You should have a document in front of you. We're going to follow the PowerPoint, but the more detailed information is in this document. It should be black and red print. Make sure that you all have that before we begin. And Maria Leyva is joining me as president of DVEA. So we bring to you the tentative agreement. This was laborious work this year. A lot of great conversations and some new things that we bring to you. And I also will be presenting to you the classified tentative agreement. On the certified side, the team is comprised of me, Chad Segerston from Gavilan Peak, serves as a BLT member, Maria, DVEA president, Kelly Fisher is the teacher and also DVEA board member, and Kim Crooks serves as a representative from BLT as well. On the classified side, Trevor Ettenborough leads the team as the classified director. Jay Kopis and Tim Yates, both assistant principals, serve from BLT. Steve Lund, Debbie King, Amy Seibold, I hope I said her name correctly, and Jeff Kingsley all represent the DVESPA side. So we're going to start with the certified negotiated changes. So starting with section 8, and this is when you can begin looking at this document. The first recommendation that we have for a change is underneath the area of criticism of employees. In this section, it outlines how an administrator is to go through the due process. And when a complaint is brought forward and it is required that an administrator speak with a student, our current language states that a DVEA representative will be present during the interview of a student if it could result in discipline with that employee. Because we have had breaches of confidentiality and the sensitivity of having a DVEA rep in that process, we consulted with one of our legal firms, and they put together a process for us that we implemented this year where any DVEA rep that participated in that process would first go through a training with both Maria and myself, would sign a confidentiality document including all of the legal requirements of participating in something like that, and then we would deploy them if they were trained. The team paused because we know we needed to bring the tentative agreement. We will continue discussions in this area. Both BLT and DVEA know that the legal recommendation right now is that we would remove the DVEA rep component, but we wanted to gather more information for that team to consider so that we could bring a solution to that to the board in the 2021 negotiated year. So that's section 8. If we look at section 9 under reprimands, we added number 2. You'll see on your document in the red print. Number 2 was added because Maria and I both receive a lot of questions. She receives questions from certified members. I receive questions from administrators on representation at the informal meeting. So we have formal meetings and informal meetings. In language currently, representation is allowed for formal meetings. And at informal meetings, it is at the administrator's discretion. And because there are so many questions surrounding that, we wanted to make it more black and white. We wanted to put it in language so that if they did go to the manual first, they would know that and not have to take the time to reach out to us. Of course, if they do, we will answer those questions, but it would be then in language. And then moving to section 15 under class loads. The reading specialist formula, I can't remember the last time that the actual staffing standard was updated. And so Gail and team spent a good amount of time reviewing our conditions and needs and benchmarking and put forward a proposal that NST considered. And this standard is what was agreed to, and we put it in language. So that's what you see in front of you. The 350 are all students, so K3 for one reading specialist. If there were 350 students, they would be allocated one reading specialist, and then incremental above that. That will be, should the board approve the certified manual, will be a budget impact for us for next year, and we'll be adding reading specialist staffing to many of our campuses.
I have a question on that. Is there some place that, an organization that would tell you what best practices, like we have for counselors, is there something for reading specialists?
Dr. Galligan said she will get that.
Okay, because I just wonder where you guys got the number from, that's all.
I had a question on that too.
Oh, Ms. Tweedy.
So are the reading specialists supposed to be doing tier 2 or just tier 3 instruction?
President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, their primary purpose is tier 3 instruction, but that doesn't mean that there are not situations in which they are also supporting tier 2, but their primary purpose is tier 3.
So they're servicing the bottom 5%?
More than likely,
so for tier
it's
3.
Usually, typically the bottom 25%.
The bottom, oh, I thought tier 2 was the bottom 20, and then tier 3 is the bottom 5%.
I'll get those numbers to you, but
Because if it was the bottom 20%, then if you took 20% of 350, then one person would have to service 70 students. And so if you were doing small group instruction, that wouldn't really work.
No, small group instruction should be 3 to 5 students.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So with 70 students, if they taught 6 periods, they would be over 10 students. With the bottom 20. That's why I was asking if they did tier 2 or tier 3, but. Okay, so I just, the ratio, I'm just not sure how it works for our students. So,
And
yeah,
so
we
we
could
provide that
provide it in the board
recommendation.
update.
We can
Thank
provide
you.
the recommendation to
It's
you.
what we probably need is your structures that
Yeah.
how it's set up, because obviously we don't put one specialist with 350 kids. So what are the different structures that you use that are designed with principals and teams, et cetera? That might help too.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have one more question. On the number for the reading specialist, what is the magic trigger number that would require the hiring of another reading specialist over that 350?
What we will do, because I can't answer that off the top of my head, is provide that to you in the update. I think it'll answer some of Ms. Tweedy's questions, and it does answer that question too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to 13, section 13, professional staff time schedules. In this area, we added C. There are times when prior to this section in the certified manual, it outlines how many minutes of prep a teacher is to receive in a given week. There are weeks, for example, parent-teacher conference week, when a teacher might not get those full minutes because prep time might be excluded on an A-B schedule at an elementary campus. That's always been true, and we really haven't had any issue with that. But since we know we're moving into early release on a weekly basis, we wanted to make sure that it was in writing that a modified calendar week could cause some changes to that prep time. Is that a good way to say that?
Ms. Tweedy?
I guess I just want clarification on that. So are you saying if there's an early release on that day, then the teachers may not have a prep on the weekly early release day?
That can be true. It's true currently. Some campuses adopt, I'm thinking elementary specifically, campuses adopt something called an A-B schedule, where they split the entire day into two, and half of the campus sends their students to special areas and they receive prep on the A schedule early release day, and the next time early release comes up, they flip to the B schedule, and those teachers now go on prep. The other thing that we also consider is that an early release is the study time and the PD time and the time that you're meeting with your teams is also considered to be prep time.
I would just ask maybe you check with other districts, because I could tell you the district I work in, if it's a 90-minute early release, it's treated different than a half day, and that's not true. Everybody gets their prep, so if we're the only district having weekly early releases that aren't the same as a half day, and we're taking teachers' prep and we're the only district doing it, I would think there'd be a lot of backlash. I could tell you for sure the district I work in doesn't do it.
And we do have many campuses that go on a crunch schedule where their preps are not, they're not the 45 minutes that they're used to, but they might go on to a 30-minute or a 25.
Yeah, Maria, what kind of research did you do on this when you guys were negotiating it?
Yes, so kind of, President Ordway, to answer that question, we're in uncharted territory. This was kind of understood. Before we had the half-day release once a month. And so it was kind of an unspoken, unwritten rule that, okay, I may or may not get my full minutes that week. But now that now that we're gonna have the 90-minute early release every week, we need to kind of use this as a beta year to monitor and test and make sure that people's preps aren't being shortened in any way, or they feel like they are working more hours than they should. So we're kind of gonna use this year as a test year, and we're gonna ask all of our site leaders to monitor what's happening on their campus and look at their master schedules, especially regarding the 90-minute early release. So we're just trying to, I know this is a 3-year plan, and so next year is really gonna be the monitor and adjust year when it comes to prep time and how we guarantee people their preps that they honestly and truly need. So we're trying to get something in language, but it's kind of a monitor and adjust for next year.
Ms. Reed?
Ms. Leyva, so we're assuming that it's going to we're putting in common language for the district, but assuming that there still will be local control at each of the schools, so the principal and the staff are determining how their prep time looks the same way that we have done previously. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all around the campus, around all campuses, correct?
Yes, President Ordway, Ms. Reed. Yes, there is a master scheduling committee, and in that time they should be scheduling their prep times and guaranteeing that it's no shorter than 30 minutes. And the guaranteed 225, that's kind of a fluid number, and we're going to try to make sure that as much as the original language is followed, but also knowing that this is a weekly occurrence and how can we best meet the students' needs and meet the employees' needs.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien?
And just for clarification, Mrs. Moffett and Mrs. Leyva, is that the practice that has been going on for some years now this language kind of fits dealing with the practice that we've already been doing. Is that correct?
Correct. It's just putting in writing.
Okay, and then because we are having the change in our schedule, we're just going to be more cognizant of it going forward. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead.
last year, the board decided through an MOU that we attached to the certified manual that teachers that went out on a personal leave of absence would be allowed to receive the pay raise while they were out on that leave of absence.
I do remember that.
While we gathered information, you asked us to benchmark with other districts to find out what they were doing. We learned, and we mentioned this to you in the presentation last year, that we were the only district that was holding positions for employees that went out and gained other employment or whatever they did during that year. We held a position and we posted those positions as limited, which meant that whoever was staffed in that vacancy would then be removed from that position when the other person came back in. So we decided that we would remove limited status away from anyone that we hired and that we would not hold positions for people that went out on personal leave. We do not recommend that to occur for anyone that went out on a personal leave for this last year because we have not been able to communicate that to them. That would be pulling the rug out from under them, we feel. So this is recommended to go into language and would be applied this next cycle for the 2021 year. So the language around staffing limited positions has been removed.
They'll be guaranteed a position, but not necessarily the one they left, correct?
We guarantee them a position in the district.
Okay.
And you'll see that a little bit later. We put language in on how we would do that. If you look at G, flip the page and look at G, we added the word, just for clarification, 5 moving assistants. Instead of relocated, we added the word transferred. The word relocated was confusing some of our new employees. They felt that if their classroom, because of growth or maybe because not as many students showed up as we had anticipated, their classroom was moved, that they would receive this benefit. And this is only given to those who have been transferred or surplused, that we add that time here. So that's why we added the word, or replaced relocated to transferred, because we have a definition in the certified manual for transferred. Under employee fringe benefits, unpaid leaves of absence, we added that the teacher may seek a position for which they are properly certified or the district will assist the employee with placement. So that speaks a little bit or specifically to someone that goes out on a personal leave of absence, that we will find them a position. They can seek a position on their own. If they see one, they can interview for it. If they don't secure a position, we will find one for them, much like we do in the surplus phase of the staffing cycle. You look at E, group insurance, 5, insurance committee, and underneath that, those are changes because old language is something that we didn't catch in previous years. We called it the committee. It's technically not a committee. It is a work team, so we changed all of that to reflect a work team instead. Section 20, professional compensation. We added at the high school level the NHS sponsor, and similar to an interventionist or what we used to call GITE, we have a allowable stipend, and the amount would be 4% in this case, that the campus can fund an employee that wants to take on the NHS sponsorship. This money would come from campus funding. It would not be an IBN addenda.
Go ahead.
I guess I have a concern about this because unless I'm misinterpreting it, is what it would allow is, I'm assuming that the work that needs to be done is something that just needs to be done at every school, but the schools can decide whether somebody's going to have to perform that for free or get paid for it. And I think that creates inequity. And that was kind of my big problem with our addendas, is that some people are having to do work for free and other people are getting paid to do the same exact thing. And I just think as a district, that's not.
What I'm reading here is it says that they will get paid 4% from campus funds, but how they allocate the money for the responsibilities with coordination is up to the individual high school, because some of them share it some of them don't.
I can answer
Is that correct?
President Ordway, also to Ms. Tweedy, that yes, upon further research, all 5 schools were contacted. So the National Junior NJHS at the middle schools, they do receive an addenda, but as soon as they get to high school, the National Honor Society, it's not spelled out anywhere. And when we contacted the sponsors at the high schools, it was done, quote unquote, under the table. Some were being paid and some were not. So this actually encourages very strongly each principal to pay their NHS sponsor 4%, and that way it can be equal, because being under the table, to Ms. Tweedy's point, it's very, very arbitrary in the number, and nobody wants to admit that they're getting paid, so it's very tricky. So we're trying to streamline this and make it more systematic across all 5 high schools.
Add to that, one of the reasons we felt it would be necessary to put it in language rather than through the non-IBN process is that we believe that it will be paid out, much like the interventionist position 504 coordinator. The language reads just like this, and every location does provide that addenda.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to say, I think it just needs to plainly explain that all schools are going to do this the same way. I just think with being a unified district, there's no under the table, it's shady, and the campus has the discretion to decide. It doesn't mean they're all going to decide the same thing and we're still going to have inequity. So I just think, I mean, it kind of is the exact problem I've had with the addendas for the
We just
last
want
2
more
years. I just wanted
language that's a little more stronger, so made like will be paid.
They
or something
will
like
be
that.
paid. Like everyone's going to get paid the same money for doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what, I mean, is very important to me.
Right.
That we're not leaving room for that type of stuff.
So
We'll we'll add a couple of options for that in the Friday update, language options or alternative options.
and it's 4% of the salary the teacher's being paid?
No, there's a formula in the certified manual. Jim, do you know it off the top of your head? It's base 4% of.
So, but there's a
Add
formula.
that too.
Okay, I guess
It's a complicated
No,
formula.
that's fine. Here's where I guess I was going with that is that if it were to be 4% of a salary, that could mean you could have 5 different NHS coordinators on campuses, all receiving different amounts. So I wanted to ensure that if we have 5 NHS coordinators on each campus, they're all going to receive the same addenda or stipend for that position. Mr.
Right.
Miglierino?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, yes, so that's an indexed amount off of a hiring schedule. So it's 4% of a fixed number. So it'd be the same amount for each one that would be identified.
Perfect. Thank you. You don't need to send the formula. I just wanted to verify that.
But you,
Good if it was real
but
little.
you were saying that sometimes they divide it into parts at the campus level. That's what you're saying by this language. The team could split it into 2 if they wanted to double team it or something. Okay. But the compensation package for NHS will be 4% of the formula.
Yes.
Okay.
Same amount of money depending upon how they decide that they want to split the responsibilities.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay, so moving to the classified negotiated agreement changes. So this is section 17, and the recommended changes in the classified area are focused on leave this year. They added the failure to report an absence is considered an absence without leave according to Governing Board Policy GCC. Reason that this is now in language is because it has been an issue you've seen in updates where we have had employees that just don't show up to work, and we make many efforts to try and find them. And so we just want to make it very clear that not coming to work or not reporting your absence is absence without leave. And then also in section 19, personal leave, they wanted to clarify here as well. You'll see that request for personal leave must be submitted to the absence reporting system, first of all, and the appropriate supervisor 24 hours in advance of the leave. But they added the next clause too for special circumstances. Supervisors may grant personal leave with less than 24 hours notice at their discretion, because we all know there are scenarios when you don't have 24 hours to give that notice. And those are the only recommendations for the classified manual this
Right now.
year.
Mrs. O'Brien?
One more thing, Mrs. Moffett, the documents that the folks who are trained related to Section 8A5, the Human Resources Train and Improve Associate Representatives, could you include those in the Friday update so we can see those legal documents? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. That's it? Oh. Are you sure? Does anyone have any questions? Well, I know it's the sad time of night for everyone, but I think if I could get a motion to end the meeting.
Okay, future meetings and dates are there, and I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 And there is no opposition to that. So, good night, everyone.